Welcome to my second episode of the introduction into the concept of five. In this episode, I would like to recap what we have been discussing in my last episode. We have been talking about the formation of the asymmetry that has been created with the direct juxtaposition of the most superior object of the Trinity and the adjacent inferior object. The asymmetry existed in form of the distinctive spatial as well as temporal attributes of both the most superior object of the Trinity and the adjacent inferior object of the Trinity. The spatial as well as the distinctive temporal attribute of the most superior object of the Trinity are a manifestation of absolutism. The distinctive spatial as well as temporal attributes of the inferior object of the Trinity are a manifestation of partiality. The restoration of the original symmetry is made possible due to the addition of a third object. This third object must manifest the complementarily opposite distinctive spatial as well as temporal attributes of the most superior object of the Trinity. Because the distinctive spatial as well as temporal attributes of the most superior object of the Trinity are on the one side eternity and on the other side infinity, the most inferior object of the Trinity must manifest the complementarily opposite distinctive absolutism, meaning a short-term existence as well as a small size. The restored symmetry that exists thanks to the distinctive spatial as well as temporal attributes of both extreme objects of the Trinity do both revolve around the partiality that is formed in between both extreme objects. The formation of partiality is paramount with hybridization, because the partiality combines both extreme absolutes in itself. As we have discussed so far, the trinity of the first concept of five can be understood as an extrapolation of the trinity of beings. On the other side, one can consider the trinity of beings as an application of the first concept of five. So can the spatial equivalent of each of the three beings considered an application of the trinity of the first concept of five. Here I give you an overview over everything we have discussed so far. The first object of the lesser duality represents on the one side the first creation and on the other side the angel of the Lord. The first object of the lesser duality manifests on the one side the attribute of transience as its distinctive temporal attribute, and on the other side the attribute of a small size as its distinctive spatial attribute. The first object of the lesser duality is being viewed through the first dimension. The second object of the lesser duality represents, on the one side, the second creation, and on the other side, Yeshua. The distinctive temporal attribute of the second object of the lesser duality is, on the one side, longevity or long-term existence, and its distinctive spatial attribute is a large size. The second object of the lesser duality is being viewed through the second dimension. As we have discussed in the last episode, the entire lesser duality is being placed within the first object of the larger duality. The first object of the larger duality is being viewed through the third dimension. The second object of the greater duality represents on the one side the hyperspace and God on the other side. Its distinctive temporal attribute is eternity, and its distinctive spatial attribute is infinity. The second object of the greater duality is being viewed through the fourth dimension. As we have discussed in the last episode, the additional fifth dimension of the first concept of five is utilized to view both objects of the larger duality at the same time, in the very same manner in which both objects of the lesser duality are being viewed through the third dimension. As we have discussed in the last episode, the second object of the larger duality is infinite. I will use this cube to represent the second object of the larger duality. An infinite three-dimensional object desires to find its finity, but cannot find it, which creates a never-ending self-reinforcing cycle, causing it to be stretched in all six directions, and is therefore drawn, if not carried, by its own infinity. Being carried by its own infinity is paramount with being in absolute dependence. Dependence stems from the Latin word deponere, which means to hang from something. So does the second object of the larger duality hang from its own infinity. A cube has six facets, causing the draw of the three-dimensional object to occur in six directions accordingly, as you can see here. Because the second object of the larger duality is the upper absolutism of the Trinity, one can conclude that the most inferior object of the Trinity, meaning the first object of the lesser duality, must manifest the complementarily opposite attribute, which therefore has to stand on its own. Because the distinctive attribute of the second object of the larger duality is absolute dependence, one can conclude that the first object of the lesser duality must manifest the complementarily opposite distinctive attribute, which is absolute independence. Because the second object of the lesser duality and the medium object of the trinity is placed in between both extreme objects, it must hybridize the attributes of both absolutes. Meaning, on the one side, the second object of the lesser duality is partially dependent and partially independent at the same time. In the very same manner in which the second object of the larger duality is dependent, so is the second object of the lesser duality dependent. The partial dependence of the second object of the lesser duality refers to the superior object, which is the second object of the larger duality above. Meaning, the second object of the lesser duality depends or hangs from the adjacent superior object of the trinity, which is the second object of the larger duality. The partial independence of the second object of the lesser duality refers to the inferior object, which is the first object of the lesser duality. Meaning, the second object of the lesser duality rests on the inferior first object of the lesser duality. Another very important attribute of the second object of the larger duality is that it is yielding. The second object of the larger duality, and therefore the upper absolute of the trinity, has no firmness to it, because it's not needed. Its structural integrity stems from the draw of its own infinity alone. Because the second object of the larger duality is the upper absolutism of the trinity, one must conclude that the inferior absolute of the trinity must manifest the complementarily opposite attribute, meaning that the first object of the lesser duality must be firm, because the second object of the lesser duality, and therefore the medium object of the trinity, does form a partiality. It has to combine the attributes of both extreme objects of the trinity. The second object of the lesser duality, therefore, has to be on the one side more firm than the superior second object of the larger duality, but at the same time has to be more yielding than the inferior first object of the lesser duality. The more firm inferior first object of the lesser duality can support the superior, more yielding second object of the lesser duality that is partially resting on it, as you can see here. The fact that the second object of the lesser duality rests on the inferior first object of the lesser duality is unproblematic, because the first object of the lesser duality is more firm than the superior second object of the lesser duality. It has the structural integrity necessary. The second object of the lesser duality hangs or depends on the second object of the larger duality above. Because the second object of the larger duality above is more yielding, it cannot provide the necessary structural integrity. Therefore, following problem arises. How can the more firm second object of the lesser duality be supported by something more yielding? The solution for the problem of a lack of structural integrity that we have just discussed is the integration of an additional element. This additional element is a sufficiently firm arc that is placed in between the second object of the lesser duality and the second object of the larger duality above. This additional element of the first concept of 5 is designed to provide the necessary structural integrity for the second object of the lesser duality beneath. Despite the fact that the sufficiently firm arc is placed in between the second object of the larger duality and the second object of the lesser duality at the same time, it does not belong to both objects equally. It only belongs to the second object of the larger duality, not to the second object of the lesser duality. The sufficiently firm arc does not just exclusively belong to the second object of the larger duality, but it actually stems from it, which makes the second object of the larger duality its actual origin. Because the sufficiently firm arc is added to the trinity of the first concept of 5 as an additional element and does not naturally form, it is artificial, similar to the artificiality of the additional fifth dimension that we have discussed already. There are actual anatomical applications of the sufficiently firm arc. One example for the application of the sufficiently firm arc that is embedded within the trinity of the first concept of 5 is the cardiothoracic system. As you can see here, your cardiothoracic system is comprised out of three juxtaposed objects. In the very same manner in which the trinity of the first concept of five can be understood as a hierarchy, so can your cardiothoracic system be understood as a hierarchy as well. The most inferior organ of your cardiothoracic system is your heart, that is placed in the very center of your thorax, right beneath the lung that is placed above it. Because the heart is placed beneath the lung, the heart is immanent in relationship to your lung, and because the lung is placed above your heart, it is transcendent. The most inferior position of the heart within the chest is comparable with the position of the first object of the lesser duality, which is viewed through the first dimension. Because the lung is placed above the heart, its position is comparable with the position of the second object of the lesser duality, which is viewed through the second dimension. As we have discussed already, the entire lesser duality is placed within the confines of the first object of the larger duality. In the very same manner in which the lesser duality is placed within the confines of the first object of the larger duality, so are the heart and the lung in their duality placed within the confines of the entire thorax as a whole. Therefore, the entire thorax is comparable in its position with the position of the first object of the larger duality, which is viewed through the third dimension. Your cardiothoracic system is directly juxtaposed to the sheer infinity of the surrounding air as a medium outside your thorax, which is comparable with the second object of the larger duality, which is viewed through the fourth dimension. The entirety of your cardiothoracic system, in its direct juxtaposition to the surrounding air, can be viewed through the fifth dimension of the quintinity. The distinctive spatial attributes of each object of the trinity apply to the cardiothoracic system as well. In the very same manner in which the second object of the larger duality is known to be infinite, so is the surrounding air as medium, sheer infinite. The same yielding as well as unyielding attributes of each object of the trinity apply to your cardiothoracic system as well. The surrounding air as medium is just as yielding as the yielding attribute of the second object of the larger duality, and is therefore more yielding than the lungs as the second object of the lesser duality beneath, and can therefore not support them. In the very same manner in which the second object of the lesser duality necessitates the addition of the sufficiently firm arc above it, so does the lung necessitate the thoracic wall for suspension. The lung manifests the distinctive attribute of the second object of the lesser duality, which is partial dependence because it adheres to the thoracic wall on the one side, and at the same time it manifests partial independence because it is resting on the heart beneath. The heart as an organ is more firm than the lung above, and therefore can support its weight. The heart, which is supplying the first object of the lesser duality, does lie within the thoracic cavity, and therefore supports itself, just like the first object of the lesser duality supports itself. The heart therefore manifests the distinctive attribute of the first object of the lesser duality, which is absolute independence. Another anatomical application of the first concept of five is your hand. Your palm, or your actual hand, does apply the first object of the lesser duality, which is viewed through the first dimension. Your fingers do apply the second object of the lesser duality, which is viewed through the second dimension. The entirety of your hand does apply the first object of the larger duality, which is viewed through the third dimension. The surrounding medium does apply the second object of the larger duality, which is viewed through the fourth dimension. Your hand in juxtaposition with your surroundings is viewed through the fifth dimension. It is likely for you to hit your elbow because it is protruding and is therefore naturally prone to it. Because the fingers of each hand are protruding from the actual hand due to their elongated form, their tips are also naturally prone to come in contact with any firm surface of your environment. This alludes to the sufficiently firm arc of the first concept of five that is placed in between the second object of the lesser duality and the second object of the larger duality. The sufficiently firm arc belongs to the second object of the larger duality only, Just like the firm ground of the environment only exclusively belongs to the environment itself. Interestingly, your fingers capture the surrounding medium in between their interstices, just like the lung captures the surrounding air within. Your fingers, in that sense, can be understood as a partiality of both your actual hand and the surroundings. The elongated form of your fingers allude to the partial draw or stretch the second object of the lesser duality is subjected to. Genesis chapter 1 verse 27 says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them." Given that God has given himself a confined body away from his infinite shapeless appearance that is anatomically consistent with the first concept of five he himself created, the same anatomy that is consistent with the first concept of five applies to all three beings of the Trinity. This is it for today's video. I hope you've learned something. See you next time, and God bless.